Do you have a habit of drawing mindlessly without paying attention to what is it that you're really drawing? Well, I do, and I think that's one of the reasons we struggle with drawing and especially with drawing from imagination. If you don't even understand the subject, how can we draw from memory? I sometimes just copy the reference without understanding the shapes or forms that build that subject. So it might look good at the end, but what's the point? I'm not really learning a lot from these studies. And if that's the case, how can anyone begin their journey of drawing from imagination? So today I'm practicing just that. Finding the shapes first by breaking down the object into basic forms or shapes, which is what I'm calling the invisible shapes, and drawing with an intention to understand deeply this time. So, if you'd like to follow along, please feel free to do that. Try seeing a little differently this time and feel free to work with whatever reference you want to work with. And let's begin. So, let me just start with spotting the invisible shapes. You know, the hidden object game in a busy scene where you have to find the hidden secrets or objects. But this time, instead of items, we are finding or looking for shapes. In other words, finding or imagining what forms these subjects might be made from. I've got plenty of references to work with today, and I got them all from Pinterest. I've chosen the very simple ones so that we understand in an easy way. So let's start here with this vase. I can definitely see elliptical shapes everywhere. The radius is bigger in some places and smaller in some other areas, and it's also very smoothly connected together. So, this form, however, not very simple to describe using primitive forms, is essentially a modified hollow cylindrical form with all the curves that we see. I'm still very confused about whether I know the eye level of these objects well, because one thing I was struggling with throughout was figuring out whether the base ellipse should be rounder than the other ellipses in the center or the top. And of course, the concept behind this is perspective. So, locating the horizon line or the eye level. But I was definitely very confused. I didn't have these concepts clear when I was drawing. So, all I did was guesswork, and it probably is not very accurate. Okay, now for the hardest one of them all. This looked like those challenging but still doable forms, and actually, that's why I picked this as my last form to practice with. But when I was done going over the parts that are obvious to the ones that hid behind, those planes that make up the back of this form, it seemed impossible for me to figure out. I tried multiple times to imagine it, but I realized this very quickly that it's actually very hard to judge, at least for me, after all those practices I did before. And by this time, I was already very tired from the previous work as well, so I gave up on this one and decided to take this up another day with a peaceful mind. I was feeling the rush to start drawing something by then, and I quickly moved to painting something, anything from these references, and I ended up picking this. I think it's a very cool looking object, and exploring it would be fun, so this is the one I will be working with. So I think let's start with that opening of the form. A leaf like shape. It's like an ellipse, but those corners are sharp and pointy and not round and smooth. The purpose of this sketch is all about understanding this form and finding how this object was constructed. So I connected that line to the edge of the top and the bottom shapes. I might be wrong here because the bend is not really visible from this angle, but I think we can really explore other ways this form could possibly be made. What you are seeing here is how I imagined this at the time of drawing, and now while editing, this is me reviewing it and coming with a reimagined version of this form. I hope my language is simple and clear to understand. It can be very challenging to explain these things because I tend to confuse myself with the words, especially when it comes to English. So I hope this is all making sense. These lines still look very plain and simple, so the sketch looks very flat. And to add some 3D-ness to the sketch, I added contour lines. And now it looks like it's got some volume, which is what I was looking for. I'm also keeping in mind the concept of line weight, that some lines are going to be thicker and some lines are going to be thinner, depending upon a lot of factors. I'm adding some more weight on some parts of the sketch to push the idea of realism further by thickening the lines around the turns and the shadows. The sketch was already filled with a bunch of lines, so I thought to add more lines in order to bring the 3D effect using a technique called cross hatching. Now, the thing is, I did it all on the same layer, and there are probably hundreds of lines here, so there's no going back. And thus, it looks very messy, so I had to make a new layer and start sketching from scratch again. This time I just followed with the lines, making sure I got the proportions right without worrying too much about the forms, as I've already studied them before. Keeping in mind the scale or the proportions, the angles, the lines, all of those things. I don't know if it's worth telling, but drawing a very thin band like it is in the opening has always been very difficult for me. These lines are so close together and they are so thin, like a strip, that it's very hard to draw in a clean manner. So that's also something that I was struggling with, which is why I did a lot of erasing and redrawing in that area. This sketch is a rough sketch. I'm not interested in line art because I don't really keep it in my final result. So I use it as a guide, and that's why I'm also adding the other lines for form and cast shadows into the sketch. Now we are ready to move to the next part to bring this sketch to life, which is rendering. Before we do that, I recently made a habit of comparing with the reference to check how many mistakes I made and in what places. So that's what I'm doing now. So there were some mistakes and they are not so prominent, but I definitely made some slight corrections in the lines and the angles. Okay, now for everyone's favorite part, the rendering. Who doesn't love bringing their sketches to life? I was drawing with this hard round brush which is pressure sensitive, so it layers on top of each other to build up the values eventually if you apply the same pressure each time. But it's also pressure sensitive, so if you press too hard, it will give you the darkest value you have picked in your palette. So I use this brush for sketching because I wanted some fine ghosting lines. But as you can see, they are not working really well for rendering. Basically, this brush is not flexible or soft enough to be used here. But for this one, I went extremely simple. The default brush of any painting software, our beloved, the hard round brush. I very strongly believe that if someone can make beautiful art with just this brush alone, they are an extremely talented artist in my eyes. Blocking in with the color, this gray is the one I thought is a great value to start with. We're just simplifying it so it does not need to be some exact color as such. I don't really pick a color using the eyedropper tool on the reference. I don't think it's necessary. What I do is eyeball the colors and simplify it into just one color and try putting it on the canvas and see if it makes sense and then try again if it does not. It's a great way to see and find better colors. It's the values that matter, and even if the end result does not look like a ditto copy of the reference, it will still look good because the values are in place. We can just keep practicing and it will help develop our eyes to pick the colors we want with more ease in the future. I was scared about that reflection on the ground the moment I decided to go with a hard round brush because that's a smooth gradient and I don't remember making smooth gradient with a hard round brush. But the moment I put down that slightly darker value right next to the ground base value, I immediately knew it would work out. Definitely boosted my confidence regarding completing the whole piece with the brush I chose. Where I was uncertain in the beginning about the result looking good, at this point I'm very confident and comfortable in my skills and in the decisions I'm making, and in the idea that it's not about the effect, it's only about the values, and that's it. The whole thing being black and white definitely helps though. Also, blending becomes easier when you find and place a middle value in between of the values you are wanting to blend together, and then you find more values in between and do that until you are satisfied with the kind of gradient you are looking for. It makes the job a hell lot of easier. What's tough is developing the eyes to find the different kinds of edges: soft edges, hard edges, and even lost edges. Once you can spot them well and get the effect accurately and are practicing regularly, you will build your hand eye coordination well and will also be able to render anything you desire. Whether it's a still life or a portrait or a figurine, whatever it is. So, rendering a portrait is not different than rendering a still life. I agree, however, we do have some preconceived notions we need to work on. For example, drawing hair is hard for me, is the one I have to work on. You might have a lot of them as well, and there is no shame in that. Actually, this edges concept is very new to me. It's only recently when I discovered them through a few shorts and reels about the types of edges that exist in art. Previously, I was just focusing on values and only values, basically asking myself, what kind of gradient do I need here? But I agree, these edges explain the light interacting with the form, so it's an important concept to study well. Yes, it's a simple subject, but I loved painting it, especially with the hard round brush. It was a very good experience for me. It filled me with a lot of confidence. Painting is nothing but an illusion of creating depth using values after understanding how light is interacting and drawing that with the different varieties of gradients. That's my understanding of rendering at this stage. I feel the round brush result was looking good, but I wanted to have another version with everything blended out. So I tried doing it with just the round brush, but it would have taken me a very long time before I achieve anything I liked. But digital is here to simplify the process and make it easier. So I use the Photoshop mixture brush to blend the hard strokes into this very smooth looking result. I also ended up adding some more depth using a soft round brush on top as well. I loved the results a lot. There's differences and possible mistakes, but it looks really nice. I can tell no difference from afar. I hope you liked my process of drawing and rendering. I'm not teaching at all, I'm learning things myself and just sharing how I have been practicing and drawing lately. So I'm feeling very happy to share it with you all. For the next time, I'm wondering if I should pick a different kind of subject, maybe like a portrait, and introduce some colors as well, just for fun. Colors seem scary to me because there are so many and they cause a lot of confusion. But I'm going to start slow and hopefully we do well with them as well. Thank you for watching the video. Take care and I will see you in my next video.